Hi, my name is Jessica, and I am the Assistant Fellowship Director for CEEP. And today we're going to go through our Living Room Conversations training on creating civil dialogue. Before we get started, there's a few things that we want you to take away from this training. Each of our trainings comes with a few learning outcomes to give you an idea if this is a training that you think will be helpful. So today we're going to be learning about how to create an environment that promotes civil political dialogue, how to begin political conversations that lead to civil dialogue, and also how to find common ground with the participants, as well as how to adapt those guidelines and tools to different situations, people, and conversations. So why is talking about voting so difficult? Talking about politics and voting can be really hard, especially with someone you've never met before or with someone who has different views than you. The goal of this training is to learn to find common ground and encourage civil dialogue surrounding political issues and voting as a whole. Framing voting as exercising your civic duty or raising your voice to weigh in on political topics that concern you can be an effective way to change any preconceived notions the people that you're talking to might have about politics or voting. It can be really hard to establish that with a passerby, but I believe that each small conversation makes a big difference, and it shows one more person how to have a civil dialogue about political issues. So why is this called Living Room Conversations? It's called Living Room Conversations because the living room is a place where you can come and you have mutual respect for everyone involved, and you are like inviting those people to have a conversation with you. And that aligns with the guidelines we're trying to promote today. Something powerful can really happen when we connect face to face, whether it's on Zoom like we are today, or if it's in person, maybe at a tabling event, and listen to other people's perspectives, and that's what we'd like to accomplish here today. If people feel respected, then they're more likely to give respect in return, and that opens them up to new ideas as we all try to find common ground together. So again, before we start, I want to talk about our guidelines for today. You can adapt these as well for your gatherings, or you can even ask people to come up with guidelines that will work best for that specific group. But these are the ones that we're going to work with today. So the first guideline we have is being curious and open to learning. The conversation is as much about listening as it is about talking. So we want you to enjoy hearing all points of view and maintain an attitude of exploration. Show respect and suspend judgment. We as human beings tend to judge one another, and we would really like today for our group to do our best not to. Setting judgments aside opens you up to learning from others and makes them feel respected and appreciated. Find common ground and note differences. At the end of the day, our goal is to find common ground, even though we're coming from a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different beliefs. But we also want it to be known that it's important to note the differences too. So it's a hard balance to strike, but we're going to try to do that today. Be authentic and welcome that from others. So share what's important to you. Be as open as you are comfortable being, because when you are open and authentic, you'll encourage that from others as well. Be purposeful and to the point. So notice if what you're saying is relevant to the topic, and maybe if someone gets a little off topic in your conversation, just bring it back around and maybe move on to someone else. And then the last one is own and guide the conversation. So take responsibility for the quality of your participation and that of the conversation. And that goes for each person in the conversation, but also goes for maybe you as a moderator as well. Be proactive in getting yourself and others back on track if needed. So to get started today, we're going to go around and introduce the group that we have here, and we're going to talk about ourselves a little bit. We'll answer some questions that dive into why we believe what we believe, and what we want to see in the world, and who we are. Our goal here is to get to know each other a little bit before we dive into our actual topic for the day, which is to vote or not to vote. This will make the transition into that topic where we might see a lot of differences much easier. The topic itself will ask questions relating to our views on voting and why or why not we should vote. So I hope that you will be able to take the pieces of our conversation with you when you are speaking to your peers about voting. Okay, so let's get started. Our first section of the conversation is just going to be basic introductions. So the things that I would like to hear from you all today would be your name, your school and position if you are in school, and if you are not in school, please tell us your position here at CEEP, and then why you're passionate about voting and about like what we're doing here at CEEP. I'll go ahead and go first. Like I said, my name is Jessica, and I went to Iowa State and studied political science. I'm the Assistant Fellowship Director here at CEEP, and I'm passionate about voting and what CEEP does because I love lifting up young people, and in any way that we can do that is good. Any way that we can do that is good. And so I like working in voting specifically because I think it empowers young people to know that they can have a place in this world too, and they can change it as well. I'll go ahead and pass it off to Ella. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, I'm Ella. I go to the University of Mississippi. I'm studying Arabic and International Studies, and I'm a Fellows Program intern here at CEEP. And I'm just really passionate about the work that we do because I've been involved in voter engagement for quite a while now, and it's just so great to see an organization that's really trying to make a difference, on the one hand, at a national level, sort of all across America, but on the other hand, with individuals, so person to person, giving students the ability to take action on their own campuses and, you know, develop professionally in addition to the work that they do.
See, Erica, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Erica. I am from UMass Amherst. I'm a second-year doctoral student in the College of Education. I am a faculty resources intern here at CEEP, and I'm really passionate about the work that we do because I think it's really important to engage everyone, voters and non-voters alike, in civic engagement and even the voting and election processes. And I think the Campus Election Engagement Project does that really well. And I think we're working towards a more inclusive conversation about voting and its impact on our communities, which is really exciting.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And Daniel.
Hey everyone, my name is Daniel Coley, and I serve as the Georgia Director for the Campus Election Engagement Project. If you look on the screen, those Dalton State College fellows are actually some of the fellows previously from the state of Georgia. I'm so passionate about CEEP because I think that, you know, like Jessica said earlier, it is so important for young people to understand just how important their voice is and how much change that they can do if they just go out and vote and encourage others to vote. So I'm very, very passionate and happy to be here to kind of be included in this training and help others be able to have that open dialogue so that we can kind of move forward and keep teaching people how important it is.
Thank you all for sharing. Let's dive in a little bit and get to know each other a little bit better. So our three questions today are: what do you hope for your family, friends, and community? What would your best friend say about who you are, and what sense of purpose guides you in your life? So you can answer one of these, you can answer all of them, whatever your heart desires. Does anyone want to go first and answer any of these? You can also take a minute to think. They're pretty deep questions.
I can go first. I think my best friend would say that I am an advocate. In different environments, I really like to bring in other people's voices. I don't just use advocacy as speaking for others, but to bring in other people's voices. And I think that that legacy probably started while we were in elementary school. And I was like I think it was like class counselor or something like that. And so I've always liked to hear from others and to bring their voices into the space. So I think that's what she would say about me.
I can go next. Yeah, and I guess you answered that question, so I'll hop to another question. You know, what do I hope for family and friends and community? I hope for my family and my friends and for just overall community that we get to a point to where we are open with one another and we can talk about our differences and not just talk about them as differences, but celebrate them, because, you know, that's one of the amazing things about living here in this country is that we get to meet different people from all walks of life all the time. And if we stop and start, you know, having these conversations with one another, we can start having an understanding and we can start moving, and our legislators can start legislating that really accurately represents a lot of people. And we can start making sure that, you know, this isn't just a place for just one group of people, but we can make it a place where people can thrive together and have successful lives. And that's what I hope for our future. And that's why we're doing this work.
And I can try to tackle that last question there. I think that there's a lot of different purposes that guide me in my life, but one that I've been sort of seeing as like a motif that keeps reappearing in all the different things that I'm interested in is the relationship between community and marginality. I think that, you know, especially, you know, in today's times, we have like a divide between who's at the center and then the people on the margins. And the idea is, you know, in whatever position you are in, and like wherever I end up, I would like to work at, you know, bringing those two together. So whether it's with the elderly, the homeless, with voting, it doesn't really matter what the group is, but just sort of finding a way to create something more cohesive and unified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you all for sharing. I think I definitely related to your answers, Daniel and Ella, because the world that I'd like to see for like my family, friends, and community is one where we all work to pull people in from the margins, like you said, Ella. I think when we're in elementary school, you're always taught like, look out for the kid who's like sitting by himself, or just look out for people who might need a little bit more than others. And I think that lesson we learned so early on in life is what I'd like for my friends and family and community.
Yeah, I would. I love that. I forgot that was something that we were taught from an early age. You know, look out for the little guy, and I think that voting is a huge way that we do that, and we can like show that.
I completely agree. Does anyone have any last comments that they want to add to our questions or conversations in this first round? Okay, I'm seeing blank faces, so we'll go to the next round. Okay, so round 2 is going to be our actual topic today, to vote or not to vote. And we touched on this a little bit in our last round of how the values that we hold really just drive our work here at CEEP and just in voting in general. So our questions today, let's just start with the first question. Are you registered to vote, and what led you to that decision, if you are? Does anyone want to start us off? Yeah, go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I can start this one. So yes, I am registered to vote. That'd be really crazy if I wasn't. And what led me to my decision really came from my family. I come from a family, and fortunately, my family, we do vote. And, you know, to be frank, I mean, we vote because there were a time where my family couldn't. And so we really prioritize voting and making sure our voices are heard, because so often than not, a lot of families' voices are not heard. So, you know, it was something for me that I was looking forward to. And I actually still remember the first time I ever was able to vote. I went with my mother. I drove back home from college 2.5 hours just to go vote with her at 7 o'clock in the morning, because of how much it meant to me, but how much it meant to her as well. And so that's kind of the main driving force on why I vote and why I urge others to vote.
I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I actually have a similar family connection. So maybe not the same line, but voting really brings my family together. My father is an immigrant and doesn't vote, can't vote, I should say. Would if he could, but he can't. So he has always said that I vote for him. And so even when I was in college, I absentee voted for every single local election, even though I was not there to really see anything about town council or anything like that. But my dad was, and he was affected by it. So he would always say, vote because I can't. And so I do. And it's been really exciting to have that for my family.
Voting wasn't really a big part of my family growing up, but when I started at the University of Mississippi, I was 17 and I just happened to join like a local voting group on campus. And it was really through canvassing and going door to door and like meeting Mississippians and talking to them that I realized like just how important voting was. And I remember like being here on my 18th birthday and like filling out my application form like at midnight, just to be dramatic. And just like I think just realizing how important it is to others and like therefore to myself like really made me want to be registered to vote.
My story, I think, is probably more similar to Ella's. I grew up in a very rural area on a farm, and I think being so far away, it was easy to isolate yourself from the world almost. And so while voting was something I know my parents did, we never talked about it much. It was never like encouraged that I go and vote when I got to be 18. But when I went to college, it was in like very politically tense times, and the more I learned about politics and the more I learned about history, I really grew an appreciation for it. And so as soon as I was able to vote, I like looked up how to vote and I made sure I was registered. And I voted for the first time as a freshman in college. And so I think the political atmosphere of the time really affected my involvement in it, because I had just gotten to college and I was learning all of this new history and politics. And then on top of it, we were living through a really historical moment too. So it was a cool transition. Thank you all for sharing those stories, by the way. I love hearing things like that. So thank you. Was there a point in your life when you didn't think that voting was important? And if so, why was that? I don't know if this will apply to anyone.
I can answer it by answering it a different way.
Yeah.
I still, of course, realized how important voting was. But it was a time where I felt very disheartened. Because, in Georgia's, Georgia politics, Georgia elections, we back in 2018, with the election, our governor's race, it was really disheartening because of how much voter suppression there was. We had millions of people who were erased from their voter logs, who were, categorized as either dead or inactive, because we have laws that say, you lose your voting rights or you lose your registration if you don't use it. And there were several people, hundreds of thousands of people who were, getting their absentee ballots sent back because of some weird law. You have the exact match law on your ID, a lot of signature verifications, and it meant a lot of people were not counted. It made a lot of people's voices did not get heard, and it made me feel very, very sad and disheartened, because it's hard not to feel like, why did I even waste my time? Why did I go vote? But it really, from that, sadness, it really pushed me myself. That kind of was a little bit of kind of the launch of my career into this, because it's, we have to make sure that people understand the laws, people understand what's at stake, and people understand how to remedy situations so that their voices can always be heard. And I think that we were really successful in that this year, especially in Georgia. We had record turnout. I'm gonna brag a little bit here. Georgia had the highest youth turnout in this election than any other state, because we definitely learned our lesson from 2018, and we got to work and we got on the ground. And I'm just very thankful for, CEEP and for all the other organizations that were able to make sure that everyone's voices were heard and make sure that everyone understood that their voice and vote actually did matter.
And if you can't tell, we're all really proud of Daniel and the work that was done in Georgia. See, does anyone else want to take a stab at answering that question?
It's just hard to remember a time where I didn't think it was important. I remember being so frustrated my senior year of high school when I couldn't vote and all my friends could. And it made me I don't know, just upset that I couldn't participate, because I was like, I watched the news all the time and like listen to podcasts. And so, I think just as I've gotten older, I think that I've transitioned a little more from recognizing how important national elections are to like realizing the importance of local elections. So I think that's where the switch has been, in like recognizing that like my vote matters at every time, like at every level, and to like show up and vote even for the local ones.
Actually, you bring up a really good point, Ella. I think maybe this question should say, especially heading into, heading off of a major election cycle into like a new semester and a new year where local elections are going to be the big focus. Was there ever a time in your life where you didn't think local elections were important? Or maybe you don't right now.
Yeah, I can answer that. I unfortunately will have to turn my camera off in a minute. Something's happening around me. But I'll say that I always thought of the big elections, so statewide, federal elections, things like that. I always thought of those as super important, held a special regard. And I think growing up in my town, I didn't really understand the nuances of local elections. And I say that because largely I thought my town had a particular political makeup, let's say. And so we were choosing among a given slate of members of the same political party most of the time. And it was very difficult for me to discern as a kid, like what the difference between this one person who follows this set of beliefs, how someone who follows a similar set of beliefs will enact things differently. And so I didn't really get that. Whereas on the state and federal levels, you often get much more discernible differences. Even for a child, I was able to understand those a little bit better. And so locally, I didn't really engage that much when I was a kid growing up, even though that's probably the time that I was most impacted by the decisions being made, when I was in the public school system and things like that, when I was playing in parks, when I was doing all the things locally, I didn't really engage as much. But my family, and this answers both the second and the third and the fourth question, I guess, my family was like, no, this is important. And they took me to every single election, every single polling place. I went to town hall probably more than I went to the park. And it was a choice to everyone else, but an obligation to me. And that's how it was always framed. So I'm still here, but
Yeah, you're fine. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Erica. And that's actually a really good segue into this next question. Is voting an obligation or a choice? And I find it interesting what Erica said, that it was a choice for everyone else, but it was an obligation for me. That sounds like something my mom would tell me. Like, you have to do this. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I feel the exact same way. I love how Erica, she said that she spent more time at town hall than at the park, and I think that's probably how I'm going to do with my children one day. They are going to spend a lot of time reading about current events and politics and stuff. But yeah, I feel honestly the same way. It feels like an obligation to me, and it's really important to my family.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I understand like the notion behind obligation, but maybe I just don't like the word because it feels imposed. I know like the phrase like civic duty gets thrown around a lot, so it's kind of like lost its meaning. But I do like the idea that it's like more of like a responsibility, like a duty. It's towards a larger goal. It's not just something like cast down from above on people that they have to vote, but it's something that you kind of get to rise up to and participate in. Mm-hmm. So maybe civic duty over obligation, but yeah.
I like the phrase rise up to it. So I feel like I go back and forth on this one, and every time I do this conversation, every time I look at this question, my answer changes. Because while as much as I'd like to say it should be an obligation, I think there are some people who really maybe they don't feel like they know enough. Like I filled out the most recent election that we had here, and there were a couple of provisional or like what's the word, like addendums, ballot measures. That's it, ballot measures.
Yeah, ballot measures and amendments.
Thank you. There's a couple ballot measures that I had no idea what they were talking about, and I had no idea what kind of impact they would have. And so I didn't answer those two because I didn't feel like I knew enough to give a good vote. And so I think it's I think I will say it's a choice, but that choice is not based on like whether you feel like going to the polls. That choice should be based on, do you feel that you are like know enough about these issues to make an educated choice here and genuinely help your community? Awesome.
Absolutely. I think yeah, we had a few ballot measures here as well, and they were huge. They were very, very huge. I actually did an Instagram live like partnership with the civic engagement department at Kennesaw State University, because they were really, really highly, like, they were really impactful here. And like so one of them gave rights to the citizens to be able to sue the state of Georgia. And I was like, for you know, things that went wrong. And I was like, absolutely. And it was like, one of them was, we have to spend the money that we raise taxes and fees for that specific purpose. And I was like, absolutely. And so we wanted this like education campaign, because it's hard to keep up with a lot of things, especially when it comes to like, you know, ballot measures, because not a lot of people know what that is. So I feel you on that. That one.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. And there are some that are like hot topic issues where they'll put like, so like something like that, that you described, Daniel, that'd be like a hot topic issue. That'd get a lot of press. But then sometimes your ballot measures are like what we had here in Minnesota. And it was like, do you want to change the date of our next election from May to March? And I was like, I don't know. Is it going to help? I don't know. And so sometimes it's like smaller policy things that probably do have an impact. I just have no idea what that impact would look like. But that's where I think that's where educating voters really comes in.
Yeah.
And like talking about it, holding conversations like these and explaining why like moving this date a year back or a year forward will make a difference.
Yeah, like, and that's, you know, because we had another one, right? I don't know if this was from this past one or the one before, but it was something like, you know, should we move the location of our garbage, you know, our garbage plant, something crazy, to something that we had this time as well was, should we raise our sales tax by 1% in this county, in Cobb County, in order to fund these projects? And that's something huge, and that's something that we are all going to see, you know, next time we make a purchase, is if it goes up by 1%. And so I think that when we start educating voters about things like that, and then they can tangibly see it, we're going to see a huge change in participation from voters.
I think we could talk about ballot measures for the rest of our time today, and I would happily do that. But now is probably a good time to practice one of our guidelines of bringing it back to our topic. So I'm going to move on. But I want to take a minute and reflect on the conversation that we just had. So how were our views of voting similar?
I feel like big picture, like values and principles, we all had a lot in common. Like we all recognize that, like, you know, it's good to vote on like a basic level, and then it's a great way to bring everyone into sort of a democratic conversation about like where we're heading as a country. And like we might differ on like semantics or the words that we choose to use to frame, you know, what motivates us or the reasons why we do things. But, you know, at the end of the day, we agree on the basics.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. What about how our views were different?
I would say I found it interesting that, you know, like for me and Erica, it was like we were both like, oh, obligation, and you both were like, well, you know, maybe not the word obligation. And I never really thought about, you know, and like what you said, Ella, about the civic duty, because that does get thrown around quite a lot, and I think that that's something that, you know, even I say a lot, because I do find it a duty or an obligation. And I think that for a lot of people, it does come down to like, I choose whether or not to do this and participate in these systems. And of course, like, we may be biased and we may think that one choice is better than the other, but for a lot of people in this country, some people just may not want to involve themselves in things that they don't understand, and it comes down to like what they know. And so I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, thank you both. So now that we have gone through our conversation topic and we've gone through a little bit of reflection with it, I want to talk about how we can take everything that we did today and apply it to the fellowship. So I understand that you can't always go through an activity like this and the conversation and the topics we were able to get into in like a 2-minute conversation that you might have with someone who passes by or stops at your table during a tabling event. But I think you can ensure that when they walk away from this conversation, they feel a little bit better about voting, they feel a little bit heard, and maybe they'll come back to you the next time you table with a little bit better opinion of voting and politics. I would say the number one thing that you can take away from our conversation today is the guidelines. I think these guidelines should be brought into every conversation that you have. When you listen to the person that you're talking to and you think about what they're saying instead of crafting what you're going to say in return, you know, that active listening that everyone talks about, it makes a big difference in the conversation. They can tell that you are genuinely listening to understand, and you'll probably learn something. And every person has a perspective that's slightly different, but just as thought out as yours. And you can learn a lot from everyone you meet. In our current political atmosphere, it can be really difficult sometimes to find a conversation like this, especially at a tabling event or maybe before a big election in your area. But even these quick 2-minute conversations, if they're kept with these guidelines and you like show respect, you suspend judgment, you be authentic, I think people will respond really well to that. Another recommendation I would make is not to start with voting or other hot topic issues. I would start with something broad and organic to help break the ice. And that was shown a little bit in our round 1 when we, while they were like deep conversations or deep topics, and maybe wouldn't walk up to someone and say, what do you want for the world? It's a good example of maybe don't start off with the really hot button issues in your area. Start off with asking the person like what they're passionate about and learning a little bit about them. Maybe ask what they're studying. Or you can talk about like maybe really small local issues that are affecting your community or your campus. So here's a couple of example questions, like I was saying earlier. Like, what's your biggest concern for our community? Or what are you studying? See what they're passionate about. What do you think of the like recent, I don't know, bike lanes that they just implemented on a major like street in your town? It could be anything along those lines. I think those are really nice ways to start, and it can get someone thinking about just what is best for your community rather than talking about like hot button issues that you may be harder to find common ground on. These are much easier to find common ground on and learn a little bit about each other. So if you want to dig deeper into these conversations, you can also host your own living room conversations. So if you go to livingroomconversations.org, that team there provides a lot of resources for hosting your own living room conversations on campus. A lot of college campuses also have dialogue events on a lot of different topics that you'll see on those websites, and they're led by professors or an expert on that topic. Students can come to the dialogue, learn from other people, and they can add to the conversation with their own unique perspectives. The goals of these dialogues is to learn from the people around you and let them learn from you, just like what we tried to do today. But it's also a really great way to create common ground and provide a safe space for contentious conversations on hot topic issues. If this sounds like something you'd like to see on campus, ask your state directors, or you can email me or Courtney at jessica@campuselect.org, and we'll help you make it happen. And like I said, if you have any questions, reach out to your state director, reach out to your campus advisor, or email me personally, and we will help you. Thank you all for joining us, and be sure to check us out and follow us on social media, or you can join our Slack channel for conversations and idea sharing with our fellows all across the nation. So once again, thank you for joining us and welcome to CEEP.